Tonight's episode is brought to you in Odorama. Don't scratch the screen or anything. Welcome to Tintincast.
Hello.
Marcus, what episode is this?
We're episode 19 now.
What? Book 23?
20, yeah, something, yes.
Amy, and book 23, which is called Flight 714
or Flight 714 to Sydney.
Yeah, or if you're from Germany, nach Sydney.
Yes.
Yes. And this is the second to last, or penultimate if you prefer, Tintin book, complete Tintin book, which is very sad. And
it is very sad, isn't it? I will be slightly bereft when these are all read.
I will, and it's a shame because we haven't done a recording for a couple of weeks because it's been a very busy month, and Marcus, you've been catching up with edits, so you've been working on the edits for the last two we did, so we haven't recorded an episode for a couple of weeks, and I've really missed it. And I remember when I picked up the book this afternoon to read it, I was like, oh yeah, I've missed this.
And it's quite funny, when I was watching the earlier episodes, it was like early spring or late winter and things, and like we're sitting in these darkened rooms in shadow and things like that. And then I was watching the Tintin in Tibet episode, like set in all in the snow, but we're both kind of sweltering in the heat and like all kind of sunburnt and stuff. It was a particularly hot recording, that one.
It's a lockdown project, this Tintincast project, which we did for ourselves, really, but we're really glad everyone's enjoying it. We've had some fantastic engagement on social media and on YouTube and everything, which we really didn't expect.
Yeah, it's been really nice. Yeah.
We thought we might get like 75 views an episode or something, and people we know going, we're enjoying it. But it's the fact that we got thousands of views on the early episodes and loads of comments and people enjoying it, people sending their own Tintin sort of memories and recommendations and stuff. But tonight, Flight 714 to Sydney.
Okay, let's do the background.
Yeah.
So last time, the Castafiore Emerald, the serialization of that ended in Tintin magazine in September 1962, after which Hergé and the studio started on the reworking of the Black Island to bring that up to date. So it was 1964 when Hergé was again focusing on Tintin magazine. In fact, he didn't really like the way the magazine was going. He felt the quality of the magazine had taken a dip. The humor was a bit coarse, even though the circulation was at an all-time high. I think it was about 600,000 copies were being sold each week. Anyway, it meant that he and the owner, Raymond Leblanc, were at each other's throats all the time, and Hergé basically wanted to take back control of the magazine, but given Hergé's frequent absences in the past, Leblanc was resisting that. So Hergé threatened legal action and said he'd withdraw his support entirely for the magazine, and Leblanc eventually backed down in early 1965. Hergé moved back into the offices at the magazine, but his heavy-handedness and criticism of staff seemed to prompt various resignations, and as a result of those complications and setbacks, Hergé eventually just lost interest in the magazine and ended up focusing more back on his home life, which by this time was very nice. He and Fanny were now enjoying many trips abroad. In fact, Hergé's absences from the magazine was starting to frustrate some of the staff who were waiting for his sign-off on ideas and projects. At one point, I think his staff even decided to finish a whole new section of a Tintin story based on Hergé's sketches to prove that they could produce good work without Hergé being there. And Hergé returned and found this and was absolutely furious. In addition to all of this, a new comic book series, Asterisk, was now becoming increasingly popular in the French-speaking world. Tintin was starting to lose ground to Asterisk. And all of these incidents proved to be a wake-up call for Hergé. So eventually in 1966, 4 years after the end of Castafiore Emerald, Hergé starts to work on Flight 714 to Sydney. Now, at this point in his life, Hergé was getting increasingly uninterested or disinterested in the Tintin series and Tintin as a character. So he used this story to explore the subject of paranormal phenomena that deeply fascinated him instead. So Flight 714 to Sydney began to be serialized in Tintin magazine on the 27th of September 1966.
Marcus, what what you've done there is you've done the opposite of what most people do, which is most people, when they say an asterisk, in other words, a star relating to extra information, they'll say asterisks.
Yes.
And you've said asterisk twice instead of asterisk.
Balls. Take it from the top.
Yeah, let's do that whole 2 minutes. No, it's just interesting. I think asterisks entered the vocabulary. And I think ever since then, it's been very hard for people to say asterisk. Fuck you, who said it when you meant asterisks.
Yeah. I've never read asterisks.
You know what? I was never into asterisks. And one of our friends had it at school and used to bring them in. And I can't remember who it was. And I read a couple, and I can appreciate it, but I'm not into it. Maybe it's something I will discover in my old age, but I don't know.
Did we laugh them out of the classroom for not liking Tintin?
It was like the Beatles and the Stones, wasn't it?
Blur and Oasis.
Yeah. Which do you prefer, Oasis or Blur? Flight 714, it's great. It starts as it means to go on with a great big aeroplane. And you know, when it starts, you've got the classic elements. You've got the plane, they're going somewhere. You've got Columbus, calculus. It's me, I can't say things. It's the heat. It must be the heat. We've gone mad. Calculus, Haddock, and Tintin, and they're all coming off the plane. And Haddock and Calculus back and forthing with his deafness.
And there's a callback to the Moon Adventures because they're going to a big convention in Australia to sort of an astronomical convention, aren't they?
That's right, yeah, which is nice. And I do like the fact that Haddock several times says, I can't believe I left Marlinspike. Because he's been saying for the last couple of episodes since the moon episode, I'm not leaving Marlinspike. And it's been very much a statement of intent. And we said, you know, the cast of Fury Emerald almost could have been the finale because it's set 100% at Marlinspike. And it's almost like after the moon one, you had Calculus Affair. Haddock is going, I'm not leaving my house ever again after going to the moon. I'm settling down. I'm retiring. I'm staying here. And in Cast of Fury Emerald, he does. He stays in the house and that's it. So this one is almost like, okay, all right, we'll go on another adventure then. And you can tell there's a bit of reluctance in the story, and obviously from Hergé, we'll do another Tintin. It reminds me a lot actually of the fourth Indiana Jones movie, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, because Spielberg didn't want to do it, and Lucas did. And I've got a soft spot for that movie. I think that people tend to slag it off and say, oh, it's appalling, and it's got the fridge scene, and it's the point where the series got so ridiculous that everyone lost interest. But it was funny. It was quite nicely done. I don't think Crystal Skull is a classic movie by any chance, but it's not as bad as people say, and I quite enjoy it. And it has aliens at the end. So
there is a...
Yes, it's got an Incan temple kind of thing, and it's got things hidden, and it's got sketches of the aliens and the spaceship on the stone wall, which Flight 714 has. And it's got a UFO in it, and so does Indiana Jones. And there is a sense of, okay, and I know they're making a fifth Indiana Jones movie right now, actually, as we record this in July 2021. And that's directed by James Mangold, not Spielberg, who did Logan. So it should be great. And Harrison Ford is still great, even though he's 79, he's still great. But there is a sense of that. And in Flight 714, that Hergé's being dragged, kicking and screaming to do another Tintin book.
Yes.
Which is not bad because we get an extra Tintin book, 60 years later. So I'm not complaining. And it does, again, it starts he's at the stage now where, fair enough, even if he was a bit reluctant and he got his team to do most of the artwork, which is the case, it's still, he's at the height of his powers. He's established, Tintin's established, Haddock's established.
Well, the last whole handful of books have just been such high quality. And again, visually, this book is outstanding, I think.
It is. I mean, you could argue there's some film series or TV series, they keep going 2 or 3 series after they should have stopped. And the criticism of this book is that really, it should have stopped at Cast of Fury Emerald. But I disagree. I think this is good. It's got old villains in it who they use to great effect. It's got a new anti-hero goody baddie in it, which is the millionaire who never laughs.
Laszlo Courageous.
Oh yeah, all his entourage are great. Again, it's very James Bond. This one, very James Bond.
Yeah.
Got a comedy villain. I mean, they use an old adversary of Tintin's, which we'll come to, as the main villain, and he's gone into full villainous mode. And when, by the time you meet him, he's being such a bastard to Tintin and Haddock. You're like, okay, I don't like him anymore. Whereas in the past, he's been used for comedy effect. But yeah, he's so great. They meet him, and he's never, he starts laughing at Calculus's inability to pronounce things properly or to hear things properly. So again, they're using Calculus as a fulcrum for the new character to, have some comedy stuff in it, which is great, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he's quite Carados is quite a Scrooge-like character, isn't he? I mean, he's this multimillionaire who, whenever he sort of celebrates, because this is the first time he's laughed in years and years, so there has to be a celebration. But rather than cracking open the champagne, it's the what's the cola that he drinks? That he's invented this kind of cola made of chlorophyll. Or something.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Sunny cola.
Yeah. Why that hasn't been marketed, I have no idea.
And he's based on a real person, Marcel Dassault, apparently, the airplane tycoon who created the Mirage jet.
Yeah. So again, he reminds me of a version of Calculus, which, in the early books, they used to have versions of, before Calculus was invented, they'd have versions of Calculus, mad professors, like eccentric old men. And you'd be like, okay, this is a Calculus preliminary sketch. And he's almost one of them post Calculus, but he gets to be in scenes with Calculus. And yes, Spaulding, his sort of toffee-nosed British valet or whatever.
I love Spaulding. I think he's kind of woefully underused in this book, really, because both him and Carados have really strong characters. I think Hergé calls Spaulding an English public school boy, obviously the black sheep of the family, and I think probably more could have been done with him. But
they sort of use him at the beginning and then ditch him, don't they? Like, they use him. Yeah. He's the first one where you meet him and you're like, he's a bad guy, because he's introduced as he's on the phone. We find out who he's on the phone to later on. He's going to sabotage the flight. The flight is in danger. We don't know. And it's Spaulding, and Tintin immediately suspects him because he knows Tintin's spying on him, and Tintin knows that Spaulding gets off the phone, starts sweating, and makes an excuse about telephoning his distant cousin who lives in Jakarta. And Tintin's like, a cousin, a likely story. But we haven't mentioned Snowy yet, and Snowy has some really nice moments in this as well. He's on a lead first few, and there's a reason he's on a lead, because later on he runs off, which is nice. He hates being on a lead, but he's always getting into trouble. And I like you hear more of his thoughts in this one than you have in previous few episodes, in Tintin Catches.
Yes, and actually he gets to be in on the mystery at the end. He breaks the fourth wall when he says to the audience, only you and I know about the UFOs, and everyone else has forgotten them. Yeah,
because why would you hypnotize a dog?
Yeah.
So he doesn't bother hypnotizing the dog. But the private jet they get,
yes,
the Carados 160, is invented by Carados. So he's like Calculus. He's a genius.
Yeah,
you're aware. It's like James Bond. You're aware, or Indiana Jones again. You're aware that that flight is in danger, and that if they get on it, they're all going to be very, very sorry. And there's a few sort of moments on the plane where Haddock's obsessed that the wings are moving, that it's part of the design.
I love Haddock's relationship with Carados, because obviously when they first meet, or when Haddock first sees him in the airport, he thinks that Carados is some kind of down and out, and he's down on his luck. And so Haddock thinks about, wow, what can I do nice for this guy? And what a great guy I am. I'm going to give him like $5 or whatever, and before he realizes that this is a millionaire.
It's a nice sort of anti-altruistic thought process he goes through, doesn't it? It's like, oh, I feel really good because I've helped out this person. And then he finally feels like a right twit when the dollar is hanging out of his hat later on. He's great because Haddock and he immediately have this camaraderie. Haddock's out of his depth. He's playing Battleship, which is a nice call to him, his time in the Navy, the Merchant Navy. And Carados is cheating, which is nice. Again, it's like Goldfinger. It reminds me a lot of Goldfinger, actually. And Goldfinger came out around about the same time as this, a couple of years before, I think.
Yeah.
I think Goldfinger might have been 64, 65, and this was 66. So I think it is. He's cheating at Battleship, and in Goldfinger he's getting he's playing poker and he's getting the answers fed to him by his phone. So that reminded me of that. Also, the being on a small jet, because at the end of Goldfinger there's a big fight with Goldfinger on the jet, and he pulls a gun and then he ends up going out the window. So it's got a James Bond sort of feel to it.
Yeah, it's funny because so many of the early books we sort of commented on, like there being kind of James Bondy elements to Tintin, way before the Bond series even was thought of. So actually now we're starting to come across things that could have influenced each other even. I
reckon so. I think the Bond books are supposed to be a spoof of detective stories.
Yeah.
They are actually a spoof. People sort of take Ian Fleming at face value sometimes, but it's like, no, he was writing a spoof, a spy series. And this is a kind of echo of that spoof, really. But yeah, they meet Scut again, or Scoot from Red Sea Sharks.
Yes,
which is nice. That in fact, this book has lots of recurring characters, good and bad, which I liked.
Scoot is quite a trusting person. He doesn't seem to realise that he's obviously been surrounded by these kind of rogue, thuggish pilots suddenly taking over Corradis's plane.
I like Scoot in this one more than I liked him in Red Sea Sharks. Actually, I felt like he was a little bit inconsequential in Red Sea Sharks. Yeah. And in this, he's got real character, and they, like later on when they split up, he's the other team and they're one team, and he's more of an ally. He's more of again, like Indiana Jones, he's more of like a Salah character, with the guy with the fez who they entrust with various jobs, John Rhys Davies. It's got that lovely sort of, I think you only live twice. The stop getting Bond wrong is You Only Live Twice, the one with the island, the volcano lair. And again, it reminded me of that, this jet, setting down on this paradise island.
Yeah, they're sort of they've been hijacked and they're taken to this sort of extinct volcano island off the coast of Indonesia, don't they?
Yeah, and I love the way that's done. I love the way that there's the runway there, and I like the use of the runway, and that the what are the native people called that they hoodwinked into helping them?
The Sondonesians, because it's sort of the Indonesian island, so it's sort of called Sondonesian. I love the way that Tintin, when they're all being hijacked, and you'd have thought they'd had bigger problems, but Captain Haddock is just really concerned that his ears are popped.
Yeah, that's great. And
he's having ear problems.
And he goes, swallow, and it goes. And he goes, swallow what? Just give him a whiskey, that they're screwed. But as soon as they get there, there's machine gun fire, and Snowy runs off, and they're firing at Snowy, and it's a very unwelcome landing right after a hijacking.
Yeah, things start to happen quite quickly when they get off the plane, don't they?
Yeah, and then of course, who do they meet on page 19? An old adversary.
Yeah, Rastapopoulos, and he is dressed in some crazy getup in his pink cowboy outfit.
Yes, he looks like a sort of fake Texan oil man, doesn't he? He instantly is a complete git. He tries to kill a spider. He says, "I'm going to crush you like this spider," and he calls Tintin an insolent puppy. And it's like he's gone now from shady guy to absolute villain.
Well, it's almost beyond villain. It's that almost pantomime dame kind of, or pantomime villain type, isn't it? Him and Alan.
Yes, Alan is back as well. Yeah, and he's more of a simp in this book. He's more of a hopeless comedy foil.
He's kind of an antagonist for Haddock as well, isn't he? He's always been a thorn in Haddock's side.
That's right. And then Rastapopoulos, I quite enjoy the plot point here. The reason Rastapopoulos has diverted this flight is to nick all of Carrera's money.
Because the last time we've seen him, he disappears into the sea in the Red Sea Sharks, doesn't he? And he kind of makes his getaway in a like miniature submarine, and it's like, oh, when's he going to be back? And he sort of says here that, you know, rather than try and make his money back, or kind of do anything too taxing to make his money back, he's simply just going to take Couradeous's money.
I know, and then just kill him and leave him on the island. It's like, it's a great sort of, it's like a petty Bond villain, because a Bond villain would destroy the world, you know, like someone like Hugo Drax in the movie. In the book, he wants to blow up London. In the movie Moonraker, which is one of the most underrated Bond films ever. I'm going to continue this belief. I think people are appreciating Moonraker now, but Drax, he's going to gas the Earth and repopulate it, whereas Rastapopoulos just wants to kill a millionaire and nick his money.
And then Alan's particularly evil. He just tells them all, oh, well, we're just going to put you in the plane, drag you into the sea and drown you.
Oh. But yeah, Alan, he pulls the cap down over Haddock's eyes and kicks him about so he can't see. I mean, he's really horrible. They're like, ha 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 ha. You're like really moustache twirling villains in this, aren't they? You hate them.
Yes, and that reminds me of one of the biggest villains in here is Dr. Krollspell, the ex-Nazi, feels like an ex-Nazi eugenics type doctor or something. He's got this truth serum and he's injecting
Mengele or something, isn't he?
Yeah, and that's right.
Is it our friend Anthony on Twitter who asked, he was speculating as to whether Krollspell was from another book where he was Calculus's doctor or something. I think he was asking. I don't think he is. I think he's a new character to answer that question. But he's horrible. He's the kind of guy, I mean, Couradeous says at one point, I don't care if you pull my fingernails out. And you're like, oh, he's that kind of guy, isn't he? You know, then have a bunch of tools, but actually it turns out he's just got a truth serum, which leads to some very funny scenes.
Yeah, it kind of backfires because Couradeous, rather than telling Rastapopoulos the code to his Swiss bank account or whatever, he starts recounting his history of petty crime, you know, from a child and when he was kind of robbing the grocers and things like that, which absolutely infuriates Rastapopoulos, who sort of has this who's the baddest baddie competition with him. But then there's the great thing where Rastapopoulos gets so annoyed that he accidentally gets stabbed by the needle and injected with his own truth serum.
Yeah, there's a great bit just before that where Couradeous is going, I'm so mean I even cheat at games on my airplane. I mean, I had closed circuit television, and Rastapopoulos is going, I don't care. Like he's got more than he bargained for by giving this guy truth serum. But yeah, then, you know, he takes it himself, which is really, really funny.
And I think that it's really interesting that, you know, usually in Tintin, that would be the plot. There would be Rastapopoulos and Alan, and they would go through the book, and Tintin and co would foil their plot, and there'd be some kind of wind up, and it'd be the end of the book. Yeah. We're on page 31, and Rastapopoulos has started to get his comeuppance. He's got injected with his own truth serum. He's been bound and gagged by Tintin and co. On page 35, he gets a thorn in the bottom from Haddock. On 36, he gets a rifle on the head and gets a bump on his head. On page 37, he runs into a tree. Page 40, he gets blown up by a grenade discarded by Alan. On page 42, he gets mistaken for a baboon, again by Alan. So it's just like this kind of the rest of the book is almost about, just making him seem the most ridiculous man on earth.
That's right. The proboscis monkey running off, and Alan's going, look at that. Did you see such a conk? Looks around at Populus, realizes he's got the same nose. And
I think in earlier books, Hergé would have just bumped them off. There would be some kind of grisly demise for Alan and Rastapopoulos. But we're sort of beyond those books now. I think Hergé has been told that he's got a family audience and he can't just got to kill all the baddies. So he sort of does you know, almost a worse fate, a fate worse than death, that they both just become these figures of ridiculous fun.
Yeah, and it leads just to much more comedy. I mean, that's the thing I think is one of the strongest things about this book is the comedy nature of the villains. They're funny. They're constantly funny. You enjoy seeing them blow each other up and fall over and get hit. You enjoy it. It's really sadistic, enjoyable fun to see these idiots bumbling about like the Keystone Cops, trying to be villains and failing miserably.
And Alan gets all of his teeth knocked out as well.
Yeah, he ends up like this, doesn't he? Which,
yeah. He talks like that for the rest of the book.
Well, that was really funny as well, because you have to sort of read it out loud and decipher it. He's just talking like this, and his S's are F's, and yeah. Again, that's very, very funny. But just popping back a few pages, I love it when Snowy comes and rescues Tintin, because it's such a lovely moment, because Tintin shed a tear for Snowy.
Yeah.
You know, and he's like, oh, poor
Tintin is crying all the time these days.
He's emotional in his old age, isn't he? Yeah. And he's like, you know, if my doggy went off into the woods, I would, this is this week's mention of Edgar. If Edgar went off into the woods, I'd be going, when's he coming back? Oh God, I hope he's not dead. And then he comes back and he's going, and he's just like licking Tintin everywhere, and his tail's going, and that's exactly what a terrier would do. And then he frees Tintin again. Snowy again is a very useful plot device, because he's small and he fits in little gaps, and he often goes unnoticed, and he can run off and he can chew through ropes and stuff. So even though he gets into trouble and he causes a lot of trouble for Tintin, he does rescue Tintin nearly in every book, I think. So he does have his day.
Yes, he's got a lovely part in this book. So by 2/3 of the way through the book, the stage is kind of cleared of the baddies of Rastapopoulos and Alan, in order for this very sort of strange third act to play out.
Yeah, they keep hearing voices in their head, and you're like, well, this will come to light, I'm sure. And it turns out again, in a very Indiana Jones twist, although Tintin has come to do this quite a lot lately as well, in the last few books as well, is the movable statues and hidden temples, underground temples and stuff, which are great. I always love that kind of.
Yeah, it's very Prisoners of the Sun, this, isn't it?
Prisoners of the Sun. Tomb Raider did it very well, which is that move this, you know, stone statue and it'll open a slab that you can go down into an underground. I love that kind of stuff. I love that trope in everything. It's great fun. And they find out that there's this guy down there who is communicating with them telepathically.
Yeah, and this is I got a bit confused, because in my version of the book, which is the one that I'm reading on my iPad, so the app version, he is called now Mick Ezdanitov, which I think is the French name for the character, whereas I think in English he's Mick Kanrokitov.
Mick Kanrokitov, yes, that's in mind. Mick Kanrokitov. If anybody can rock it off, Mick
can. So he's this mysterious scientist which seems to have some sort of powers of telepathy, and he's based on this guy apparently called Jacques Bergier. And the character does actually look the spitting image of this Bergier, who was a co-producer of this journal called Planète, which explored sort of esoteric ideas. And he was interested in the possibilities of extraterrestrial life and UFO sightings and things. So Hergé had been interested in all of this and in Bergier's work and in the magazine for a while.
And you think, you know, when you meet Kanrokitov, that him being telepathic is the most far-fetched part of the story, until you realize, how is he being telepathic? Well, he is like an emissary between this world and an alien world.
Yes, and this is why I have this rather bizarre T-shirt on, because this is, well, it's the movie Stalker by Andrei Tarkovsky, but that was in turn based on a book, a Russian book by the Strugatsky brothers called Roadside Picnic. And Roadside Picnic was only written a few years, like 3 or 4 years after Flight 714. And basically the premise of Roadside Picnic is that there are these aliens or extraterrestrials who have sort of landed on Earth in a number of places. And they seem to have used it as a jumping off point, a stepping stone to explore the rest of the galaxy or whatever. And they just seem to have sort of spent a nice afternoon on Earth or whatever. And so these zones they get called in Roadside Picnic are sort of, they almost compare it to, you know, just someone going on a trip and having this roadside picnic halfway through, so that there's this alien refuse and kind of discarded stuff. And And there are these stalkers who they sort of see these areas of the earth that have been visited. There's been these visitations by the aliens, that they have some sort of magical, mystical power, that they have something. And these stalkers will go into these zones, which have been cordoned off by the authorities, and take kind of rich businessmen or whatever to go in there to find this place at the heart of the zones, which are supposed to have mystical powers and will be sort of wish fulfilling rooms and things like that. And it really reminded me a bit of this, that you have this sort of Pulau Bompa, the island, where you've had, it seems, over the last several thousand years, there'd been a staging post for UFOs. It's this is what sort of Can Rokitoff and Ezdanitov, or whatever you want to call them, is sort of saying that this is what the island is. It's some kind of extraterrestrial staging post almost.
Well, it's funny as well, because a lot of people said, he jumped the shark or nuked the fridge, whatever you prefer. When he introduced aliens, he said it makes the series seem really artificial. But the thing is, aliens probably do exist, I mean, especially in recent times. This year, we had of course, during the pandemic, no one really paid attention, but apparently, there is more proof of alien life than there ever was. And, as our religious beliefs, I'm agnostic, you're Buddhist. We don't, I can watch Indiana Jones and not particularly believe in the power of God. I see it as a science, it's a sci-fi thing. The power of God blasts them all to death. I believe in nature. I believe nature can blast you all to death, but I don't think it's God personally. Some people do. I believe in aliens though, so I don't find aliens far-fetched at all.
No, I think if you think there are sort of multiple worlds, the multiverse, and that there will be other life out there, whatever it looks or sounds like,
Well, that's it. And, some people think aliens, it's like dinosaurs or aliens, like dinosaurs were real as well. They're not science fiction. Aliens are not science fiction. Aliens are just, it's the possibility of life on other planets. It's not that far-fetched. Whereas God, to an agnostic, seems quite far-fetched. And, some people have a problem with aliens. As soon as you put aliens in something, in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, they were interdimensional beings, they were called.
Mm.
They're just from another dimension. It's a way of saying, they've disappeared into another dimension instead of going up into space.
I mean, Hergé seems to have been influenced by this book called The Book of Betrayed Secrets by Robert Charroux, and that suggests that extraterrestrials not only exist, but they've sort of had an influence on humanity throughout history. And I mean, not dissimilar to the way that there's always a strand in sort of the Twin Peaks series that there is this kind of talk about sort of UFOs and the Pine Woods being sort of, it had maybe a stopping off point for other forms of life which may have had influence over the community as well.
Yeah, and that is very fun. And again, they do that in Indiana Jones too. They say, well, how come at some point we've got all these designs? How come we went forward so far? Is it because aliens visited and stuff? And, you got to be careful, because sometimes you can go into Scientology and stuff and say that we're all lizard people. I don't know how much I believe aliens have visited Earth, but why not? I mean, we don't know.
So I mean, this very much seems to belong to Hergé's sort of shooting star moon books, science fiction oeuvre. How do you pronounce that? Oeuvre.
Yeah. Or oeuvre, if you want to pronounce the R-E at the end, but I think the French say oeuvre.
Right in with your pronunciation suggestion.
Oeuvre. Yeah, it does have a shooting star vibe to it. It's kind of, by this stage, it's kind of a best of, because you've got comedy, villains, crashes, chases. No cars in this one, because there aren't any cars on the island. So it might be the first one without a car chase, or any cars at all. They land on the thing. The lava flow chase at the end is very exciting, and Snowy getting caught in the whirlpool and that whole thing.
Yeah, and that also allowed Hergé to use all kinds of new, I think, illustration techniques. So he sort of used airbrushing and things like this for the volcanic kind of the red glow in the sky and things, which he's not used before. He's also using a lot of these frames now, and this has happened for the last few books, where you have speech bubbles overflowing the frame that they're in, or sort of explosions and things which sort of go beyond the confines of the frame as well, which always make things look kind of super dynamic.
Well, he was an artist at this point, wasn't he? He was very much pursuing being an artist and not a cartoon.
Yeah, he was looking more and more at sort of contemporary art, abstract art.
And I know it's easy to say, you know, again, Tintin was very successful, but he'd been doing it his whole life. He was tired. He had terrible eczema in his writing hand, his drawing hand, and he was in a lot of pain. And he just got his new life with his new wife, and he, you know, or his new girlfriend at this point. I think, I don't know if he's married.
No.
So he wanted to do other things, you know, and 40 years of Tintin or 30 years of Tintin. I mean, that's most of a lifetime, you know. You can see why he wanted to do something different. But I'm glad he kept going these last few books because they are fun. This one, again, it ends with that brilliant news report that Jolly on Wag is enjoying.
Yeah, it's a kind of excuse to get Jolly and Wag at the end. Sort of, he always seems to be pulled in at the end of the adventures now, watching TV or something, and he's seeing them all sort of recount what they can and can't remember of their adventure.
Yeah, and I think apparently Hergé regretted putting the UFO in there so explicitly, but I don't mind it in there. You know?
I think, I mean, there's a few things. I mean, I think he probably regretted that. Again, it seems to have been quite a race to the finish again. There was quite a lot that he wanted to explore in this kind of third act, but because of this 62-page format, you know, you have to kind of wind it up. And
some critics said it'd be really nice to see Tintin meeting aliens. And yeah, but again,
you can't do that.
No, they would have said that's too over the top. I like the fact that it's a little bit of a mystery, and
Yeah.
I think what he regretted is they could have slightly resequenced the ending so that you're in on the fact that, and Snowy are in on the fact that they've met aliens, but you don't see the aliens, you don't see the UFO, and they're just like, what on earth? And there's a strange, you could have Snowy going, what's that light in the sky? Oh, it's a flying disc. You know what I mean?
I mean, that's the end for Rastapopoulos and Alan, isn't it? They get beamed up into the spaceship and taken off, whereas Tintin and co get dropped off in the dinghy. And I don't know where Rastapopoulos is going off to be, I guess, anally probed by the aliens or something.
I was watching The Simpsons the other day, and he was going, "Are you going to really probe me?" And Kang just goes, "There are limits to what we can learn from anal probes." Yeah, why do they always have anal probes? Yeah, Rastapopoulos, you know, if you believe Einstein, Rastapopoulos is probably still up there at the same age, and he'll return to Earth, you know. Like
yes.
We
could write a continuation of the series.
We could. It's almost like he's saying goodbye, because we know the next book is the last book, and when the next book has a recurring character in it, which we'll go into, but Flight 714, it says goodbye to nearly everybody, but it's sort of like at the end of the David Tennant Doctor Who, they do episodes where basically they use up every character, and you know he's saying goodbye because it's the end of that era. So it felt a bit like that, but again, I think it's one of those books that by title and cover it delivers, you know, everything it promises, even though I think it might be a slightly minor one.
Well, let's talk about it. Let's talk crystal balls. What do you think?
I really thought long and hard about this, and I think you can tell where I'm going with this, is that some of the books I gave a not quite perfect score to, like King Ottokar's Scepter, I think are terrific, but not quite utterly perfect. This one, I think I'm going to give a 5. Which seems quite low, but it's partly because I really enjoyed it. I think it's terrific fun. I think it's, if someone said what's one of the most fun Tintin books, I'd say Flight 715. I think it's brilliant. It just, when I think about it, falls short of being as good as some of those 6s and 7s. That's why I'm giving it a 5. Really, I mean, I love it. It's another Tintin book, but I think I'm going to be a bit discerning this week and give it a 5.
Oh, well, I won't be discerning. I'm going to give it a 6. I think I do really enjoy this one. I think the characters are great. You know, to be introducing characters as strong as Laszlo Carreras and Spaulding. Yeah. These are amazing characters to be throwing into the story, you know, right towards the end of the series. Although I don't think Hergé quite realizes their full potential. And the book's a little bit rushed towards the end and kind of peters out a bit, but I think it's just full of invention and some of the most beautiful graphics of the series as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think, again, the cover is beautiful. This copy is from 1975.
Yeah, one of the very early ones. Yeah.
And it smells like it. It's a Methuen one. I think I got secondhand in a bookshop in Harrogate when I was a kid. and it delivers that Lost Temple adventure vibe. But yeah, we're coming to the end, aren't we? We're coming to the last Tintin book. So how do we bridge the gap between this and next week?
The very long gap. This adventure comes to a close in Tintin magazine on the 28th of November 1967. It's published in French by Casterman in 1968. And the first English translations were published by Methuen the same year, initially as Flight 714. So when was your copy, did you say, 1970? Five. Okay, so just 7 years in.
As old as we are.
Yeah. So Casterman was delighted to have a new Tintin book to promote after 4 years, and they were keen, obviously, to rival the popularity of Asterisk. Although the promotional party for this book launch was somewhat overshadowed by the huge student protests of May 1968. Critical reception of Flight 714 was mixed. Despite the quality of the graphics in the book, it was criticized for the somewhat farcical portrayal of the baddies in the book and for leaving the mystery of the UFOs unresolved. But the book itself was a huge success. It sold 500,000 copies, but that wasn't good enough for Hergé. Asterisk.
That's the one.
Asterix was still outselling even the latest Tintin book, and so Hergé started looking around and using other medium to bring Tintin up to date and down with the kids. So a version of Prisoners of the Sun was released in 1969 as a film, and Tintin and the Lake of Sharks appeared in 1972. Obviously Hergé was completely fed up with Tintin by this point, and he, as you say, he developed bad rashes on his hands during the making of this book. There were long periods when he couldn't work on it at all. And Hergé tells his friend Michael Turner around this point that he's fallen out of love with Tintin. He said, "I just can't bear to see him." And around this time, Hergé, he's just past 60 years of age. He wants to spend his retirement without Tintin and enjoy his hard-earned cash and travel the world. So is it the end for Tintin? Find out next time as we review Hergé's next book, Tintin and the Picaros.
Oh, and it's the first one where Tintin has a change of outfit, but a very subtle one.
Yes. Don't be disturbed, but Tintin is wearing flares.
Yeah. Well, it's been great to do another episode. We've got more than one more episode left because we've got a few bits and bobs other than the last book to cover. And plus we love doing them, so we'll keep this going for a few more episodes. But I hope you enjoyed that one. See you next week. See you on the internet.
See you on the Internet of Things.